Oh. Hello and good evening. Welcome to the first MFEN lecture. Very excitingly, new programme from the Faculty of Emergency Nursing. So welcome to those of you who are joining live, and welcome to those of you who are watching on catch up. One of the greatest things about our lectures is that they're available on catch up, so you can have them when it suits you. And our MFEN students who has her, she does her lectures whilst she's ironing. She finds that's the easiest way to manage. So I think that's a jolly good idea, because there's not always something good on the telly. Right, now interrupt me at any point if I go Dalek, and I'll repeat what I said. So this evening is the introduction to the MFEN programme. That's a little bit of scene setting, telling you what to expect, telling you a bit about the Faculty of Emergency Nursing, a bit about the different layers in the model. Okay, so off we go. Would be good if this works. All right, so first things first, a bit of webinar etiquette for those of you who haven't done webinars before. The session is being recorded, and Susie will make sure that the recording is available for catch up for anyone who's registered for the MFEN programme. Please keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking, because that interferes with the session and can echo and bounce around at your end. If you want to speak, a quick way to come off mute, because we all struggle with the mute and unmute business. The quickest way to do it is just hold down your space bar. That's a very quick way to do it. There is a chat function, and you're very welcome to input questions for me to answer, and I'm perfectly happy to be stopped at any point to be asked questions. Ros will keep her eagle eye on the chat, and if I haven't answered something, she'll draw that to my attention. Ideally, I'll be able to answer all your questions this evening. I'd prefer to be able to answer them now rather than having to follow up later, but if there's anything I can't answer now, we'll follow it up with you at a later stage. If you're struggling with reception at your end, I'm sure you know this by now, because we've all been doing virtual stuff for so long, but turning off your camera usually helps when reception's not great. Oh, and there's me, Mr. Typo, for the webinar etiquette. I must sort that out then. Please don't share the codes for the MFEN sessions or the recordings unless you've had permission from FEN to do so, please. So that's the housekeeping over. Gonna move? Yes. So first things first, I know that some of the folks on the call know about the Faculty of Emergency Nursing, but I know some folks don't. So we'll just assume that nobody knows anything, and explain how the Faculty of Emergency came about. So the Faculty of Emergency Nursing is a body of nurses who are committed to ensuring that patients who require emergency care receive the highest standard of care. And I know that's really, really difficult when you're under pressure in your department, but let's just take that time out now to think about what's the highest standard of care and how can we do that. Now, primarily, the faculty does that by providing education for nurses who are working in one type of emergency care or another, and helping them as individuals to achieve their own potential during their emergency care career. It can be really difficult just to make time and space to think about stuff, to be taught about stuff. So this is a way to do that sets aside time. That doesn't mean you've got to sit reading things if you don't want to, and trying to work out what the heck it means. So we work in collaboration with other organisations to improve emergency care, and many of us who are on the faculty are involved in a whole range of local, regional and national committees, expert working groups, advisory panels, and various collaborative roles within other professional organisations. So we don't just work back at the ranch, we also do a lot of things between us, not each of us. We do a lot of things about shaping emergency care nationally in our own countries. So the concept of the Faculty of Emergency Nursing was originally the idea of Professor Rob Crouch and Gary Jones. I don't know if you will have heard of them. Rob Crouch is a consultant nurse at Southampton, and Gary Jones, I forget where Gary worked, somebody will tell me. Gary Jones is considered by many to be the grandfather of emergency nursing, and he wrote many of the first textbooks on emergency nursing. And once upon a time, he was chair of the council of the RCN. So Rob and Gary had a good idea, and they talked about it to other people who helped shape that idea, and they gradually gathered a lot of people together to talk about it and work out how we could do that. And it was under the aegis of the RCN. So there were a lot of workshops around the UK looking at how do we model emergency care? What does it look like when we try to teach it? One of the interesting things which we don't really think about now in many ways, but it was a really hard nut to crack at the time. And I remember these debates and sitting there thinking, well, what does emergency care do? What is the purpose of emergency care? Why is it different to other areas? And what's different is that you are caring for people who have undiagnosed and undifferentiated conditions whilst they are being diagnosed and differentiated. So it's a period of great uncertainty when everybody wants certainty. And that was really brought home to me when I was working in Birmingham, and we were a bit short-handed in A&E, as you often are, and a nurse was sent over from a ward to help us. So there was I on majors with this nurse, and I said, right, well, come on, we'll work together and we'll make a start. And she said, so how do you know what to do? And I looked at her and I thought, I don't understand what she doesn't understand here. I said, well, you just work it out from how how the patient's presented, and you work out what obs to do and what else to do, perhaps some painkillers or some antibiotics. But she still didn't get it. But how do I know what's wrong with them? Well, you don't. You know what their symptoms are, and you work out what's wrong with them. And I hadn't really understood until I had that interaction with them, this is many years ago, that the concept of dealing with patients where you don't have a diagnosis and you don't have a management plan and you don't have a prescription chart is really, really difficult for some nurses, really difficult. So that it's a very short, pithy way of putting it, but we are caring for patients who are undiagnosed and undifferentiated. Nobody's made any decisions yet about where they're going to go. Although, of course, those of us who are more experienced kind of go, oh, well, that patient's going there, that patient's going there. That's hard won, that learning. It takes many years to get to that point, as I'm sure many of you know. So from a education point of view, the overriding driver, as Rob and Gary and their colleagues were working through this, was that there's an awful lot to learn in emergency care, and it needs to be broken down into layers and sections, because otherwise you just can't learn it. It all becomes a selection of random facts that don't hang together. So you have to find a mental model to enable you to sort it out. Now, the current FEN board have built on that original work. We've refashioned the competencies and taken out the things that looked quite dated, that were about very specific government documents and things at the time. And last year, we successfully launched the AFEN programme, the Associate of the Faculty Emergency Nursing programme, for nurses who are new to emergency nursing. So absolutely delighted this year to be able to start off the academic year. It is the academic year, September, able to offer the MFEN programme. And the MFEN programme is for those who are learning to lead emergency nursing in their own workplace. It doesn't have to be as the practice facilitator, it doesn't have to be as the department manager. It just has to be that you're in charge of whatever for however long, or you'd like to be, and need to be taught how to do that. Okay, so this is the FEN model that was distilled all those years ago and has been refined somewhat since. So if I just use my cursor to highlight where we are and what we're doing. So after much discussion, you can imagine feisty people, emergency nurses, very opinionated, all of us. So there was a lot of robust discussion before this was distilled. But we realized that there were certain things that were core to absolutely every type of emergency care setting. And it doesn't matter what it is. I'll use as my example for that infection control. It doesn't really matter who you are, where you are, who your patients are, infection control rules still apply. So we said things like that went into core. And those cores also need to kind of progress on out. So obviously people who are new to emergency care have got quite a lot to learn about just simply responding to presenting symptoms rather than starting with a diagnosis, a medical plan and a nursing plan. They've got to start from nothing. So quite a lot to learn there. Obviously, once you've grasped that, then and got it well embedded, then you might be ready to move on, and indeed to this program. So this level is called member. So MFEN is member of the Faculty of Emergency Nursing. And there are certain things that are core, no matter what emergency care setting you are in. Again, I apply infection control, only maybe at member level, because you're more senior. You would be expected to ensure that everybody else adheres to the standards as well as doing so yourself. And then there are people who are even more experienced, who go on to do wider things, and they're at fellow level. So there's things, again, that are core at fellow level. And maybe if I use my infection control example, that might be setting infection control standards for emergency care, not necessarily just in your one department, but maybe across your regional area. I know Manchester and Birmingham often do things very similarly between departments. So, you know, someone working at a fellow level might be setting infection control standards in all those departments in that particular city. But of course, it's not quite that simple, because not everything's core. There are certain things that only apply to certain specific types of patients. Now, it's fairly obvious that there is a wide age range of people that could come into an emergency department. There are going to be little people from day after birth, or occasionally, just occasionally, thankfully it doesn't happen every day, you might get one born there, right through all of the adults to the older people. And then obviously we know that sometimes people die in emergency departments. So a large proportion of the competencies are about the age range and applying knowledge and skills to the age of your patient, not predominantly what's wrong with them, but the age of them. Of course, age does mean that some things apply, not others. It's very unusual to find intussusception past the age of 4 or 5. It just doesn't happen. Equally, you tend not to get myocardial infarctions in children. They haven't had enough years to develop the atherosclerosis to cause the problem. So there are some conditions that will only apply to older people, only to adults, only to children, and learning that's quite important. Now, as we've refined the model, we've realised that the crossover between adult and older person is quite significant. And so what you'll find in our qualification and in our teaching is that the adult and older person have been put together. And where there's a bit of variance, we ask for the variance to be evidenced. The child and younger person is almost as much work because it very much echoes the adult and older person. It's just, of course, you've got to apply it to anatomy and physiology that changes quite radically as you work through the age range. And then the other purple one here is the care of the patient with psychological needs. That doesn't mean mental health. It means patients with psychological needs. It means patients who are really struggling with the diagnosis. I had a complaint to read the other day. It's a very nice one to read through, about a man who was diagnosed with cancer in the emergency department. Now, we all know about 25% of cancer is diagnosed in an emergency department. But we maybe don't think too much in our melee of trying to sort out the umpteen patients there that exceed our facilities. We maybe don't think about what it's like to be that person who's just been told you've got cancer and you're in the middle of chaos. There's physical chaos outside you and the psychological chaos inside you. And you're in an emergency department, and it's not an oncologist telling you that, yes, you do have cancer, but here's my plan. It's an emergency department clinician saying, I'm terribly sorry, you've got cancer. And what we'll need to do is admit you for further investigations so that the specialists can work out the plan. It's a very difficult place to be. It's very difficult news to hear. And when you think about people being told they've got cancer or that somebody's died, we often think that it's done in a private room and all the rest of it. Actually, it's not. We maybe would like it to be, but it's not. There's many things that are suboptimal, and they really do cause patients a lot of upset and distress. And I think sometimes we, in our anxiety to get everybody processed on time, we don't always pause to think what's the lived experience of this person being told what's happened. I think again of the man who shattered a femur. I was putting a Thomas splint on. He'd slipped and fallen over in the ice. Now, why on earth that fractured his shaft of femur, I think, was up for discussion. However, how long am I going to be in hospital? Well, says I blithely, we'll have to see how you do, but, you know, expect an operation and then maybe up to a week in hospital and then off home. But, you know, you'll be in cast braces and or plasters, depending on what exactly the surgeons decide, for 6 to 8 weeks. Oh, says he, can I go? Can I work? Not if it requires driving or walking. Self-employed gentleman. That was him out of work for a minimum of 8 weeks with no income. That the break in his leg was actually the least of his concern, because he was fairly confident we could fix it. The rest of the stuff that came crashing in on him, with me blithely saying, oh, about 6 to 8 weeks, as we do, was really his hardest problem, and probably the one I helped him least with. Then, of course, we mustn't forget major trauma management. As I have mentioned, shaft of femurs. Very important we learn that, because we all know, we've all seen the articles, we've all been indoctrinated. We know that major trauma management, when done well, makes a heck of a difference to the outcome, and means that a patient, makes the difference between a productive life after survival and really life-changing injuries or possibly death. The minor injury and illness, very, very important. We've moved the illness now into the adult and older person and into the child and younger person. So that section now is very much about minor injuries. And then over in the orange, we've got major incident planning and pre-hospital care. On this model, it all looks equal. In reality, it isn't. The pre-hospital care and the major incident planning are much smaller sections. The purple sections are mandatory in the AFEN programme, not completely mandatory in the MFEN. And then the major trauma and the minor illness sections are larger than the pre-hospital and major incident, but smaller than the others. Okay, so that's your mental model when you're kind of thinking, what the heck's she doing? What's she talking about? So from the model, you can see the second level is MFEN. That means, as I said before, member of the Faculty of Emergency Nursing. It's for those people who are already competent emergency nurses. Now, I reckon after many years practicing on my colleagues at work, I reckon that you don't complete AFEN for 2 to 3 years. The taught programme for AFEN is 2 years, but reality is that it actually takes about 3 before the nurse is fully competent. So MFEN is you've done your 3 years or so apprenticeship in A&E, in another emergency care setting, and you're starting to think, do you know what? I know what I'm doing now. I'm ready for a new challenge. Now, I'm going to say to you what I say to absolutely every person I ever do a post-interview discussion with. And of course, they're always the ones that haven't done so well. You only wheel out the practice development nurse to do the discussions post-interview for those who didn't get the post. And what I'm going to say is, being in charge of an emergency department for a shift or just for a section of the department is a different job to being a staff nurse. And you don't get a next level up. You don't get a CNM 1, you don't get a band 6 just for being a really good staff nurse. You do not. And many people think, well, I could do that, it's easy. And many people think, well, I'm really good at my job. I've put in the years. I've proved to them I'm a really good nurse. Yeah, you might be a really good nurse, but you have to understand that being the person in charge is a different job. You can't do that job without being a really good staff nurse. You need to know your stuff. You need to know all the things that could come through the door, and you need to be able to advise and guide more junior staff. So it's not entirely possible for you to just launch forth and think that you'll get the next level up without, well, just as a reward, if you like. So MFEN is for those who have heard what I've said and go, no, do you know what? I am ready for a new challenge. I'd like to give this a go. Now, not everybody, it won't suit everybody to do that, and that's fine. But for those of you who would like to try, we've been road testing the MFEN competencies. We've had a look at the teaching requirement and how we could map everything out. Now, at this point in your career, there's 2 directions you could really go. You could go nurse practitioner, or you could go operational shift leader. I've worked with bosses who've tried separating those, and I've worked with bosses who've tried to blend those. I don't think there's a right or a wrong decision. I think there is a right and a wrong fit for some people. Some people make better nurse practitioners than they do shift leaders. Some people, vice versa, make much better shift leaders than they make nurse practitioners. But if you look for a course to teach you to be a nurse practitioner, you can take your pick. They're all out there. But there isn't a course that will teach you to be the nurse in charge. So that's what we've pitched this program at. Very, very deliberately, we're going to try and teach you to be a nurse in charge and to be really good at it. We'll shortcut some of the things you would spend years learning with a bit of luck. So experience tells us that you should expect that the main components of all of this will take you around 2 years to get through. So that's why we've chosen the program length. But there is a qualification attached. And I think you've got to be realistic. I don't think that qualification is going to be something you can nail in 2 years, especially if you've not yet had any experience of shift leading. If you're a very experienced shift leader, you may be in a CNM2 or Band 7 type role, and you've spent years at the low layer below, then you might do it and do it quite quickly. But I would just add that warning that if you can do it quickly, great, but please, please, please do not sacrifice your work-life balance or educational hat on, the embedding of rich learning, just to speed and competition with your colleagues. It isn't speed that matters, it's quality and getting it really good, making sure you really know what you're doing, and understanding some of the concepts that we'll be presenting. Okay, so what's the MFEN program? Let's start into what you get and what you have to do. So what you get is you get 2 years of lectures covering within the core part of the MFEN program, the development of self and others section. So within our core, well, within all this, I'm to think of it, but the self and others only is in the core. We cover knowledge, we cover application of the knowledge, interventions, and we cover care delivery, and then development of yourself and others. So this program is very specifically targeted at the MFEN level of developing yourself and others. You will have experienced emergency nursing leaders teaching you live and answering your questions if you attend the live webinar. Obviously, all of the lectures will be recorded and you'll have access to all of the recordings. So you don't even need to think about taking notes, because you can always play it back on catch up and go, hang on, I didn't quite get that. Let's play it again and see if it makes more sense next time. Those of you who do attend the live, please, please, please ask questions, because I guarantee if you're thinking of a question, somebody on catch up will be thinking of that question, and it would really help if you just ask it on the live session. What you have to do is you have to pay your membership fee. You don't get some for nothing, so the fee has to be paid, and many departments are taking corporate membership for FEN, so it might be that your department is one of them, and so your membership fee is paid by your department. So unless your employer has paid, you will not have access to the catch-up recordings. And Susie's very particular about checking your name against whether you've been paid for before she issues a code to enable you to get into that. You will have to create an account on the website. For that, you will need your membership number, which will be provided when Susie contacts you. And if you're on the MFEN program, make sure that that's all clear. There's boxes to tick. So we need to make sure that you have your account with your name and that you want to do the MFEN. So then it's very clear who we're working with. And then obviously you attend the lectures either live or on catch up at your convenience, because I recognise that a Thursday evening isn't going to suit everyone. Now, the next question that we get asked is, do I get a qualification? The bottom line is, it's your choice. Option A is you attend the lectures, you learn something new, but you don't work towards a qualification. that's fine. You don't have to attend live. You can attend on catch up. Either way, at the end, there's a QR code comes up that you can zap, and then you fill in an evaluation form, and then, as if by magic, a certificate arrives back in your email account, which you can show your manager to prove that you have been attending. Some managers give half the time as study time, some give 2 hours of the study time for the lecture, but then won't give you homework time for any portfolio evidence. So you have to see what your manager's doing and what's reasonable. Option B is to get the qualification. Now, we're anticipating that the qualification for MFEN level will be called a Level 7 Diploma in Emergency Nursing. There may be a little variation on that naming, so please don't feel too hard done by if it isn't exactly that wording. It's equivalent to a master's degree, but because we're teaching it as a vocational qualification, you're required to produce evidence in a clinical portfolio. You don't have to do university type assignments and in that mode. So here's what you have to do for the qualification. You have to work with an assessor in your workplace. And you have to produce a portfolio of evidence against the competencies. Now, obviously, your assessor isn't going to produce the evidence. They're going to assess the evidence you produce, or maybe do some assessing of your practice as you go along. The MFEN lectures are on the 2nd Thursday and the 4th Thursday of any month. And if we happen to have a 5th Thursday, which I've noticed we have a couple of 5th Thursdays in the 2-year programme, then there will be an MFEN lecture then as well. And those are going to be on a lot of leadership theory and a lot of nuts and bolts of being a leader at the first level. You're also very welcome and indeed encouraged to attend the monthly assessor workshops. They're on the 3rd Thursday. We're trying to keep it to Thursdays for you, so you don't feel it disrupts your weekly pattern. And the point of going to the assessor workshops is to learn how to be an assessor yourself. And there's a separate qualification to be an assessor if you want. And obviously that's to teach you to develop junior staff. So for those of you who remember the old 998s and teaching and assessing courses, it's in the same mould, but because it's vocational learning, it's not quite the same, nearer to the, oh goodness, I can't remember what it's called, the D3132 of the MVQ system. You also have the option, and indeed we would encourage you to attend the monthly FEN webinars, which are on the 1st Thursday. Now they're more predominantly clinical sessions, so do feel free to drop in on the ones that you think are interesting. They're free access and open access. You don't have to worry about booking. It's nice if you tell us, but it's not a disaster if you just turn up. Obviously Zoom can cope with more than a room full of chairs can. You also have the option, if you wish, to access the AFEN lectures. Now, the AFEN lectures are on weekly on a Tuesday, same time, and they're working their way through, obviously, the associate level. So you will find the level is a bit lower, but you're very welcome to dip in to things that you find are interesting. The compulsory modules of MFEN are core and an age-related one and psychological. So I know one of the ladies on the webinar tonight is paediatric nurse, so it would be perfectly fine to do the child and young person and the core and the psychological one, and just don't worry about the adults and older people because that's not who you're dealing with. And then you need to pick an optional module depending on what your interest and area of practice is. Slides are a bit sticky. Right, so what evidence would you put in a portfolio? Well, this is classic first day of a course stuff, isn't it? This is the right, I need to book in with WH Smith's, other stationers are available, and get the ring binder and the poly pockets, the dividers. No, you don't, because with the FEN membership comes a CPD Me portfolio. So that will be provided as part of your membership. So all you have to do is collate the evidence. I'm sorry for those of you who are stationery lovers who were looking forward to an excuse to buy some more stationery, but electronic portfolio is provided for you. You don't have to use the CPD Me portfolio, but you will have to submit electronically. So the stationers are going to miss out this time. So we would expect, depending on the module, but we would expect that there would be case reviews where you go through reviewing what you did with a patient, some assessment of your clinical ability. We call them mini clinical examinations or mini KECs, and I'm going to spend the second half this evening talking about the big mini KECs for MFEN, and working your way through the component parts of that, so you see how the lectures build up to provide you with the skills and the information to do the examination at the end. That will form a huge part of your evidence for MFEN. Assessment of your clinical skills and your ability to use medical devices. Oh, I see we've got a comment in the chat. Let me just see what that is. I know that's just Ross saying carry on, make comments if you wish to. Assessment of your clinical skills and your ability to use medical devices. We call those DOPS. That's demonstration of procedural skill. And when I finish preparing lectures, I will be moving on to getting the DOPS circulated and then up onto the website, so you'll be able to use them. You're not compelled to use that format. If you've got another format that you use at work and that's okay, well, that's fine. But it's always good to have a template. Love a template because it gives you an idea what you're trying to achieve. Multi-source feedback, we've got a document up for that already that you can use. That would be similar to a 360 appraisal for anyone who hasn't yet had the joy. A 360 appraisal means that somebody who is your manager gives you some feedback. Somebody who works at the same level as you gives you some feedback. Somebody who works junior to you gives you some feedback. And people who do completely different roles, for example, in your case, the porters maybe, or the receptionists, or the secretaries, or trying to think who else we might ask, or maybe someone in a different department that you have a lot to do with, could be asked. And on a multi-source feedback, there's usually very specific things that need to be covered. So we've got a pro forma for that. You need to provide some succinct. You see, I've underlined that. That's deliberate because it means don't waffle on. It just creates words and stress for you. Succinct, analytical, reflective accounts. So don't string it out. When you've said it, you've said it. You'd be expected to have a personal development plan and then evaluations of progress. So you set out either by yourself or with an assessor and say, right, what's my development plan? How am I going to get from the beginning to the end of this? And then at set intervals, you have those sort of set intervals now at work, they're called appraisals. So at set intervals, you meet up and go, how am I doing? Am I keeping up with my plan? Am I not? What am I really struggling with? What's going well? What's going not so well? We love annotated patient records. That's fabulous, but please, 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 they have to be anonymized. Otherwise you're breaking the code of practice. So absolutely categorically, no way of being able to identify a patient. It breaks my heart when I have to mark a patient, mark someone down and say, sorry, go back and do that again, because they've failed to anonymize adequately. So please don't do that. Just sort yourself out now. You must anonymize correctly. And you will need to complete the advanced life support course for the correct patient age group that you're working with. You don't have to do adults, children, and trauma. You just have to do the right one for the for the age group you're doing. Let's not put ourselves through more pain than we have to. Now, we get asked a lot of questions about how these qualifications work, because it isn't the same as a university. That's the bit that gets a lot of people, because it's like, hang on, I get university assignments. I understand how that works. So let's work our way through the university assignment type questions. So first of all, we usually get asked, is there a word limit? No, there isn't. There is no minimum or maximum. You've got to cover the learning outcomes, but succinctly. If you were putting it in a stationary file, it doesn't need to run to 3 lever arch files. You haven't managed it succinctly. And as an external examiner once said to me, part of the requirement at that level is to be able to select the evidence that answers the question, not just put it all in and leave the examiner or the external assessor to sort out which bits are relevant. You sort out which bits are relevant and answer the learning outcomes. The next question we always get asked is there a deadline? And the answer to that is no, there isn't a deadline. Within the qualification, there's more than one unit, and you can submit each unit when it's finished if you want to, or you can submit the whole thing in one go. Absolutely fine to submit, let's just say for the sake of argument, you've done the child and younger person section. If you've finished that and you've got all the evidence against all those competencies, then by all means, submit the unit. As long as you and your assessor think that you've got everything sorted, great. Now, next question, how many attempts can you have? Well, our validating body is Cymru, and they don't have a 2 strikes and you're out issue. It's you can attempt as many times as you need to. It's either good enough to pass or it needs more work. And when you send it back in, if it's either good enough to pass or it needs more work. I'm sure actually most folks will go, hang on, I'm not sure it's quite good enough yet. And the assessor will go, oh, I'm not sure. You'll soon get the feel of it. And then the next question is the qualification included in the membership fee? I need to be very clear about this. No, it isn't. The membership fee gets you an electronic portfolio, it gets you access to all the lectures, it gets you access to recordings of all the lectures. It doesn't get you a qualification as well. You can't have your education that cheaply. So we're giving you about 90 lectures in this program. So for the amount you're paying, you're getting a lot of 2-hour lectures. The additional qualification cost will be around about £600, but, and here's the big but, you don't have to pay all that up front. If you're submitting just 1 unit at a time, you pay for that 1 unit. And then when you're ready with the next unit, you pay for the next unit. The only bit is that if you decide you are going to go for the qualification and there's no need to sign up for that tomorrow, that's fine. Just take some time to think about it first, do some lectures, whatever. If you do decide you're going to go for that qualification, we do need to register that you will be doing that so that we know and we can plan to have internal quality assessment. Now, I'm just wondering if I remember to do the quality assessment bit. Yes, I did. That's all right then. So that takes me nicely on to the way this gets assessed. So you don't submit to an examiner and you don't submit to some stranger who sits with you. You show your work to your assessor in your workplace. If you're using the performers, that will help. You don't have to, but it will help. And the assessors have information about what a pass looks like and what needs more work looks like. So they're called sufficiency documents. So that can all be worked through. You don't have to worry about whether you got to get someone from somewhere else. We'd love your assessor to be someone you work with. And it needs to be someone who's got considerable experience in emergency nursing and be in a senior role. So it's no good picking your best mate who's at the same level as you. You've got to be able to have someone who can guide you through things that they've been through already. They need to work on the personal development plan with you and evaluate your progress on it. And they need to make sure that you can access hands-on practical skills. Once they've signed off the portfolio, so they've gone through it with you, made sure you've covered everything, ta-da, then they submit them to the Internal Quality Assurance Board, a MFEN, for accreditation. Okay, and then the Internal Quality Assurance Board will submit a subset of that, of what's sent to them, to the External Quality Assurance Board at a GORED, and that is what you're paying for. So the reason it isn't as expensive as a university degree is because the work is being done by you and your assessor, or you with your assessor's guidance, and the bit you're paying for is the quality assurance. You probably never see the quality assurance bit in a university, but I guarantee you it's there. And no course runs at a university without quality assurance, both internal and external. And I'm sure you've all heard of exam boards sitting and what have you. That's a quality assurance board, the exam board, working through and making sure that that's all being done to standard. Now, the quality assurance boards are there to make sure that the assessors are assessing to the same standard. We provide the assessors with a sufficiency document to work to that says that's good enough, that needs more work. And we then check their work, that they have made sure that they've only signed your work off if it meets the standard to pass, right? Right, now, obviously, assessors need support. And actually, those of you attending an MFEN programme are probably going to be asked at some point to be assessors for FEN for your junior colleagues who are on the AFEN programme. So you might want to start there. You know, you might want to start, do you know what, I'll go along, I'll do the assessor programme, and I'll learn how to support my junior colleagues, and then I'll start on my own. Or you might want to start on your own and then become an assessor. Never mind. Webinars are every third Thursday of the month. So those webinars teach you how to do the assessments, and they go through how to do a case review, how to match it to a sufficiency document, how to index things, how to assess using a demonstration of practical skill, a DOPS form, so that you're very clear on all that. And then how to do the I'm sorry to say, but that's not quite good enough. I need you to go away and do a bit more work on it. Conversations. All of the assessors are allocated to assessor pods to help them with deciding whether pieces of evidence are of a sufficient standard, and each pod is supervised by an internal quality assurer. So all the assessors can go to their designated IQA. And then the assessors can kind of go, well, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? All right, so I'm a bit short of the mark there. I was being a bit lenient, or I was being a bit stringent, just to make sure that the standards are correct. If you don't work in a department where there is a FEN assessor, then I would suggest you ask your practice development nurse or your practice educator, or whoever's in charge of education in your workplace, to get in touch with us so that we can work out what to do next for your department. Right, that's quite a lot to take in, I think. Any questions so far before we have a break? Okay.
No, thank you.
Right, okie dokie. So that is quite a lot. So I'm just going to say fluid balance break. Let's take 10 minutes. 6 minutes past 8, and I shall pause the recording so that nobody misses any fun on the recording. Whoops, back one. And I'll see you all at about 6 minutes past 8. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so had a break, had a Kit Kat and all that. So let's carry on. Now we're going to stop talking about courses and portfolios and what have you. And we're going to start talking about course content. Okay. Bit of theory. I like a bit of theory. Let's get a bit of thinking going on and working out what's happening. So you've had to sit and listen to me prosing on for an hour, and then you've had a chance to get them stretched legs. So now I want you to talk to each other. For those of you who are on catch up, you'll have to talk to yourself and get yourself some paper and pencil. But for those of you who are with us now, the question is, what is the role of the nurse in charge? Now, these are some of my colleagues. These pictures are all in the public domain because they're pictures I took for A&E Live on Twitter pre-pandemic. So they're all doing nurse in charge type stuff at the time, and they're smiling nicely because it's me that's taking the photos, so they know me, and they're going, "Oh, Jeanette, go away and leave me alone." But I just picked out things that they were doing while they were in charge. So I want you to now think, what does the nurse in charge of an area in emergency care do? What do they do during the shift? And you've got 10 minutes for that. And I'm going to send you out into a breakout room to do it together without me earwigging. Let me go back one. And we'll just stop sharing and start breakout rooms. And you can go and chat between yourselves. Right, so all back from the breakout room. Now, my PowerPoint has messed up. I spent ages today making it look all beautiful, and it's not playing the game. But never mind, we will just go back and we'll answer the question I set you. And then I've got the answers. We'll just have to abandon the PowerPoint briefly whilst we go through the answers that I wanted to take you through today. Okay. So she says, looking for the pen. Right, what answers did you come up with, everybody?
Oh, there were lots and lots.
Good. Well, I'm glad there were lots and lots. So
I was going to say, I'll go.
Did anybody write them down?
Yeah,
I'm not
did.
going to be that ambitious, but it might be an idea if you write them down at your end, because really, I think if me and the board pen start making friends with each other, you'll just all laugh at me, and I don't really need you to do that. Okay, so if I was in a room with you, I'd get my flip chart and flip chart pen out quite happily. Come on then, what do you think that a nurse in charge does?
Supports the staff, both medical and nursing.
Right, supports medical and nursing staff. Yeah. Okay.
Patient flow.
Yeah, monitor patient flow.
Monitor patient flow.
Triage.
So what was that about patient triage?
Sorry, yeah, but I just repeated what Roz said at the same time. So I've got monitoring patient flow for waiting room triage and rooms.
What else does a nurse in charge do?
Delegates the staff to appropriate areas of working.
Okay. Delegates or or allocates, depending what word you use. I know at our place they always go, what's the allocation? But everywhere will have a slightly different way of expressing it. Yeah.
Acts as a leader.
Acts as a leader. Yeah.
Staffing and sickness.
Right. Checks the staffing and sickness.
Staff
Clinical
wellbeing,
expert.
Clinical expert, staff wellbeing.
Complaints.
Deals with relatives and or any complaints, issues arising.
Manage complaints.
And compliments.
Yeah.
You get them.
Well,
Oh, good.
Is mindful
they're
and tries
go-to person for problem solving and asking questions.
Solving. Okay. So I feel I've missed one. You said clinical expert, staff wellbeing, managing complaints and compliments, problem solving, but somebody said something in between those ones that I've missed.
targets to try and adhere to
All right.
government targets.
Adhere to targets. Yeah. Anything? Any more for any more? You've got at least
Audit.
each there. That's good. Audit. What you're auditing?
So they'll have like impact control, environmental audits, fundamental care audits, uniform audits if they're doing spot checks, dignity audits.
They do a lot of audits at your place, don't they?
Mm.
At our place, they roll them all into one and they call it a NAS. What's it called? Assessing, audit, assessment, something or other. They do, so they come and do all of it in one go, and an external assessor comes in and does it.
Patient experience audits. The nurse in charge won't do them all, but they'll make sure they're done during a shift.
Okay.
And then they
Audits
get left.
as to,
Yeah.
okay, anything else?
organising skill in the right place.
Organising skill in the right place.
And communicating well to the team.
Any more on your list?
Constantly problem solving.
Aye, we've got that. We'll add a
Oh.
tally stick to problem solving. Yeah, you're not wrong. Problem solving. Okay, so I had got you a lovely couple of slides where I was going to have everything in, flying in. It was going to be beautiful, but my laptop seems to have failed to do the sync thing, and it hasn't picked up the updates, which is annoying. So we'll just cut away from the PowerPoint. We'll come back to it later for Susie's lovely QR code. And I'm going to, it would be a good idea if I stop sharing, wouldn't it? I'm just going to find the mini keks that we are going to use for the nurse in charge. And a lot of the things you've come up with are on there, but there's quite a few more as well. And I thought it'd be really helpful if you had a look at it, because then we can talk about, first of all, doing it as an assessment. So what we thought we would do is ask your assessor, if you're on the MFEN programme, to have a look at this. So I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger so that I can move some of our comments out of the way, I think. Let's just get rid of this bit, and then I can show you what a form, one of these forms looks like, as well as what's on the list. Now, just about everything you've said is on the list, but the list's a bit longer than that. And how did we come up with this list? Well, we came up with this list because, it's stuff that's either in the competencies, the MFEN competencies, or it's in your NMC. Now, all of you on the call have to work to the NMC criteria, but I know we have colleagues in Ireland who have to work to the NMBI. I think I've got the right letters in the right order there. So essentially, code of practice and your code. So these things come from the code of practice or MFEN competencies, and all of those are based on evidence from research done at whatever point some time ago, and has gone into the canon of literature. So I've made it look nice now, so we can have a look at it. Right, so you'll see this come through eventually onto the website. So the usual stuff about who you are and what happened and data was done. And then the assessment criteria, essentially, we didn't see that bit done, or it didn't meet the criteria, or it did. And if you want to make comments, fine. So sort of things you'd expect a nurse in charge to do is make sure that they introduce themselves to everybody. I had on my slide, my beautiful slide that I have no longer got, a box for introductions, you know, that when you're going to be working with a team that day, a lot of us do it anyway. Oh, hello, so-and-so's here, right, and you'll be sitting at that, right, okay, who's boss today, that sort of thing. But that's introductions and making sure that everybody knows everybody else and everybody knows where everybody's working and what they're going to be doing. Introducing the students, if the students or there's a new team member, making sure people are buddied up, making sure that they've introduced themselves to patients and visitors as the nurse in charge, not necessarily doing a round when you arrive, but that you make clear to everybody that you're the nurse in charge. Some departments I know have a nurse in charge bib or a badge that says I'm in charge in this area. So kind of doesn't matter how it's done, so long as it's clear who you are as the nurse in charge and that everybody who's going to be working with you knows who you are. Then there's a comment there about listening, and making sure you listen to people. It's very easy when you're inundated as the nurse in charge to just go, yeah, whatever, and you've missed half the comments and you don't give it your full attention. It's really difficult to do. I don't underestimate how difficult that is, but it's really, really tricky. Looking for demonstration during your assessed period that you're using a range of verbal and non-verbal communication styles to get things moving in the general direction of onwards. Actually quite important as I was thinking about that is that it's about consciously using those communication methods, not just going, oh, well, we've got to get on with it and blah, 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 but actually consciously modeling the use of verbal and non-verbal techniques, being very aware. It's not a performance, but being very aware that you are role modeling to a lot of people from that in charge position, and really being conscious of that at all times, and holding that in so that you don't cause problems yourself. Because we all have worked with, as my human factors instructors said, none of us like working with Frank the Plank, and on a bad day I'm Frank the Plank. So let's consciously model it so we're not doing a Frank the Plank day. Maintaining a professional rapport with patients and families and carers. And you did pick up the actual potential conflict stuff, spot a complaint before it's likely to happen, intervene, get it de-escalated, get on top of the problem before it is a problem. That's not an easy thing to do, but there we are. Allocating resources. You mentioned allocating resources, that's humans, but it's also equipment. At the moment, I know we've got the biggest issue is how many blood bottles you got, because I don't know about everybody else, but national shortage of blood bottles seems to be the biggest issue, and being a bit careful about how we use that precious resource at the moment. Prioritising care, I know we've run it together there, but prioritising care. So how are we doing that prioritising? Don't worry, you've got Claire McCarthy all of the next session on prioritising care to look at different ways you can do that. There's no need to feel in the slightest bit concerned that you're not going to make it through all of this. We've got plenty sessions to make sure you can do this. We've included making sure that all patients have their pain assessed and managed. Again, got a session on that for you. Not going to say you've got to use one pain tool over another pain tool, but you do have to make sure that patients are being assessed. I'm going to blow my own trumpet. I did some research that was published in Emergency Nurse yonks and yonks ago about why do people come to an emergency department, and I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. The vast majority came because they were in pain. So it really says if that's why the vast majority of people are coming, then you really have to make that your priority thing that you assess and manage. We talked about having psychological needs managed. Again, got a session on that for you on the what's it called? Emotional responses to sudden illness and sudden injury. So session on that will be coming downstream on the programme, but making sure that all the patients have had that dealt with. Now, lead on compassionate, safe, timely delivery of care. My goodness, I think that's kind of manage flow, but let's just look at it saying, hang on, it's a bit more than just processing people out of the door in a timely fashion. We'd love that to happen, but it also has to be compassionate. Think about the man who's just been told he's got cancer and how that feels with 80 other patients and their hanger-on with them all around him. Think about my man with his shaft of femur who can't work anymore and is going to be without money as well, and potentially without clients and all the rest of it. Think about it being safe. With 80 people in your department, it's not very safe. So what can you do to make it safe? Fire warden duties spring to mind, but that worst case scenario, crowd control and fire safety. And then making sure that you achieve all the other clinical things that need to be achieved. Have the antibiotics being given within the hour? Has anyone gone back and checked that pain relief worked? Has anyone made sure that patient with dementia hasn't run off, and that you did think about putting the purple socks on them so that they would be spotted and returned to you later without labelling them? And has everybody done the documentation? And we'd like the documentation to be a little bit more than just the obs, please. A little bit of explanation about what's going on and what the plan is would be good. So lots of different lecturers on that subject on how we can achieve that. I'm delighted to say my old boss has been persuaded to come and talk about documentation. Absolute stickler for it he was. So I've managed to persuade him to come and talk to you all about documentation and information governance. Did you, as the nurse in charge, work collaboratively with the team to ensure that patients received the best outcomes? They had their essential care needs met. That's toileting and fluids and pressure areas and so forth, and their safety maintained. They didn't fall on the floor, they didn't fall in the toilet, they didn't wander off when they shouldn't have done, they didn't manage to disappear with a cannula in their arm, those sorts of things. Very tricky, but very important. Next one, that patients who you would consider vulnerable, and there's lots of people going to that category now, but we're thinking of people with cognitive impairments, we're thinking of children under 18. Please don't forget the 17-year-olds. I'm always banging on about 16 and 17-year-olds. People forget them, they think they're adults, they're not. And I've checked all jurisdictions in the UK and Ireland all say 18 before you're no longer a child. So just be really clear about that. And the people who are in abusive, coercive relationships, people who've been sexually exploited, people who've been trafficked, they're all vulnerable and will need individualised assessments. The batch assessments won't do for those people. They're people who failed the batch assessments and now need the specialist one. So making sure those specialist assessments are done and evaluated and the right actions are taken out of that. I would certainly expect the nurse in charge to know about which patients that is on any shift they're leading. Managing patient care pathways. I mean, some of that's about flow, isn't it? But it's also making sure you've done or caused to have done the things that will speed along a path. We all know the neck of fever pathway. So let's just do it. Let's not wait to be told. Let's do it. Make sure it's all done so that things can go as quickly as a bed is available. And we know that isn't easy. I'm sure everyone's had difficulties today. Certainly our ambulance service have. So if they're having difficulties, we're having difficulties. What about making sure that privacy and dignity is maintained? Whoops, where am I on that? Yep, there we go. Maintaining equity and dignity for the team as well as the patients. It's not, I'm getting quite cross with patients who think it's okay to be racially abusive to our staff. It's not. And whilst I'm not going to pull them out for it, I am going to say, please don't speak to my staff like that. I understand you're not feeling very well. I understand your mother's not feeling very well. I understand you're anxious, but please don't be rude to my staff. Personal environmental risk assessments. This is a biggie for me at the moment, making sure that if you have patients with cognitive impairments, that environmental risk assessments have been done, that you've modified the environment as far as you possibly can, that if we know that somebody is easily distracted or very prone to picking up stuff as a weapon, that we strip out a cubicle of all the non-essential stuff so that they don't have weapons easily to hand or ligatures easy to hand or ligature points easy to hand, that we've got the right person in the right cubicle as far as we can possibly achieve it. Really difficult. I do understand that's difficult, but if we can get the space and the person as a good fit, then you'll have fewer problems. Infection control, I keep saying infection control, but actually, you know, it is up to you to make sure things are clean, that they are ready to go, that they're ready for the next person, and that we've done infection control risk assessments on all the patients on entry. We're really good at that now in COVID. We didn't used to be very good at it. We were very sloppy about it. Oh yeah, whatever. But actually it's super important because we don't, as we've all learned in the last year last year, 18 months, we've all learned you simply can't afford to put someone with an infection next to somebody who doesn't have an infection, especially when it's as nasty as the current one. We'd love you to stay calm and professional at all times. Not easy, understand that. There are times when it's very, very difficult to do the swan. Practice makes perfect, but trying to keep your head whenever all around you are losing theirs, as is said in the famous, is that Rudyard Kipling? If you can keep your head when all around you are losing theirs, then you are a man, my son, something like that. How about this one? We'd like to see that the nurse in charge is keeping any differences of professional opinion between colleagues professional, polite, done behind a closed door if necessary. We don't need a slanging match in front of the patients. We sure as heck don't need a slanging match in front of the patients that will just use that to split the staff and then come back to bite us with it time after time after time. So that professionalism and being polite to each other is incredibly important at all times, and asking staff to maintain that standard is the point. It is a task for the nurse in charge. And then you're right, absolutely right. You've got to be the person checking the staff sickness. You've got to be checking the staffing, the staff well-being, making sure that you're motivating the team, and you're advising people as you go along, that you're allocating or delegating appropriately, and that your advice given is evidence-based, and that you do stop to check that the person has understood the advice you're giving them, and they're not just going yeah and haven't quite got it. And then, as far as you possibly can, mitigate against mistakes, near misses, harm, potential health risks to everybody. This is a public liability issue. It's not just your colleagues or your patients. It's making sure that anybody that sets foot in the area that you're in charge doesn't come to harm because of near misses. You know, it's not unusual for the workmen to come in and take a tile out of the ceiling, so we don't want anyone walking under their ladders. And that's as pragmatic as it gets, really. You know, you can't have puddles on the floor, ladders going up into the ceiling, wires trailing everywhere. It's all got to be as safe as you could possibly make it for everybody. And then I love this one. I'm not quite sure how you do this one. I think this is going to be fun, this one. Efficiently responding to competing priorities. I think that juggling of, this is a priority, now hang on, that's a priority, now hang on, that's a priority, right, hang on, of those, which is, okay, that one is because that's the cardiac arrest, sorted, or that one is because it's the bat phone, or that one is because that's the director of nursing, so I will answer that one. Oh flip, that's the chief exec, so now I'm stuck. But you get my drift. So what are we doing? What's the priority? The ambulance, the senior person who's arrived, the telephone call, the relative who is demanding attention for their particular person, and keeping the show on the road when bed management are getting quite cross. I've got someone to come and talk to you about managing that conflict that you can get between staff when they have different priorities to you. So we've certainly got a session on that, managing that conflict between staff. That relationship with bed management and the nurse in charge is really quite key, and it can sour very quickly during a shift if you don't keep very much on it. I've mentioned supporting and advising juniors, and then advice and constructive feedback is given very supportively and respectfully, and you're giving enough supervision. And maybe if you've really got a little 5 seconds somewhere, calling people over to say, look at this, or come and see that, or let me just show you, explain to you that, do that. Making sure all the while that you are following various policies. Lucky you, we're going to teach you how to write policies, how to write procedures, how to write standard operating procedures, so that you're clear on what goes into them and why you would do it that way, and why, even if you're not writing them, what process somebody else has had to get through to get to that point, no matter how annoying it might be to you. So you get the general idea of all that stuff about safety and professionalism, and making sure that ultimately by the end of your shift you have behaved in a way that strengthened the trust and confidence of everybody in your ability to lead. So quite a lot in that. And my point in showing you, because you can see it's not a perfectly finished document yet, a little bit more work to do, and there's a sufficiency document to go with it to explain to your assessor what that looks like. But you can see as we've gone through, to achieve that stuff, which is not easy, our lectures are paired to that document so that you are taught each component of it throughout the programme, plus more, because honestly 90 lectures is too many for what's in there. So you're taught all those components before you ever have to start trying to achieve it without some support. Well, that brings us very much to the end of tonight's session. Let me go back to my PowerPoint, because I absolutely must bring up Susie's lovely feedback slide, which she will tell me that you need to cam scan and fill in the evaluation form, and then magically a certificate appears in your email. I don't know how she does it. It's amazing. I've tried it out. It does work.
Did you get a certificate though?
I got a copy of my completed form back. But I had asked for that.
Oh yeah, so I'm going to hold my hand up and say that John actually set up the last feedback forms for AFEN and linked the automatic certificate. So it was all very new to me, and I did the feedback form, I created it and linked it.
And it works.
We saved the responses. It's great. I can see the feedback so we can learn from that in the future. And then I realized yesterday when I tested it for the first time that I didn't have an email sent to me with the CPD certificate. So bless him, I asked John how he did it. Yeah, I asked John how he did it, and I think he's been so busy he hasn't had a chance to reply. However, I think I managed to sort it, and I've just did it myself. I've literally just scanned it with my phone. It's really simple, isn't it? I didn't realize how scanned it with my phone here, and I've just answered all the questions, and hopefully. But anyway, if you guys have scanned it, or anybody watching, when you have scanned it, if I haven't sorted out the automatic certificate, then it'll be saved on an Excel spreadsheet and I'll get them out to you when it's sorted. But I'm going to look into it later or tomorrow. I actually did get them. I did get a certificate to my email, but of course it was sent from my Gmail account, because my Google Forms is linked through my Gmail. So it actually sent from my own personal Gmail account. So that's why I had to, so I had to take it off, and I'm looking into setting up a new Gmail account for FEN Learning, and she'll send them all through that.
Brilliant.
But yes, have a go. It's great. And actually my certificates that I designed were really pretty.
She says modestly.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so now, obviously, this is MFEN, so there isn't a lecture every week. Next week is the third Thursday of the month. So the third Thursday of the month is the assessor workshop. So you're very welcome to join that at 7 o'clock. There's a different code for that. Susie, where did I get code for that?
Oh,
Or do you not?
am I still on?
The code for the assessor workshop.
Yeah, so that's on the live timetable that's on the website.
On the website.
Yeah,
Lovely.
when AFEN, MFEN members log in, they should be automatically taken to the AFEN, MFEN homepage, and that's where all the learning resources are going to be. So at the moment, the AFEN timetable, so there's images on the screen, and if you press on the LMS, you get taken to the AFEN webinars. And I've created a course which this MFEN, these webinars are going to be uploaded, and they'll sit alongside that. And the same with the timetables. If you click on timetables, you can see the live AFEN webinar timetable and the live MFEN timetable. And I've populated the timetable with the assessors code for every session between now and the programme. Well, this term anyway, is populated. Except for the monthly, because those have got to be confirmed, but they'll be populated as I get them. So yeah,
good. So the assessors ones are the same one each time.
Yeah.
And next time, so in a fortnight, what have I got there? That's not good. Let's get rid of that. I had a slide there. Bother this sync. My slide there was supposed to say to you, next time in a fortnight, it's Dr. Claire McCarthy. I've got to tell you she's a doctor because she's got her PhD this year. And she's very proud of that. And we're very proud of her for achieving it. So it's Dr. Claire McCarthy on prioritising care. Thank you all very much for coming.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeanette.
Thanks. Bye.